of the presidential candidates. This is our second last interview. Our final one will be next Tuesday with Sean Gallagher. But I want to welcome now Labour's Michael D. Higgins to the programme. Michael D., good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Pat.
In interviews and debates, you've shown your knowledge of the functions and the limitations of the office of President. But beyond the constitutional, the ceremonial, what do you think would be the defining characteristic of a Michael D. Higgins presidency?
Well, I think that it will be energetic. And I think it will be energetic about creating trust. I think that when I look back over recent years, right across the kind of interviews you have with representatives of institutions, there has been a very serious loss of trust. That's very important. I think as well that whatever I say will have to be something of substance. In other words, language has let people down in the last 10 or 15 years as well. So it's just not going to be good enough to tell people what they want to hear. Now, I have deliberately, because I've had a longer campaign, because I had to seek a nomination. And as I was listening, I've been looking, if you like, at the real economy on the ground in agriculture and agribusiness. And also in those places where you have pharmaceutical chemicals, which are very important. And I've been meeting the people. All right, I've met people at the top of the export tree, but I've also met the people who are creating jobs in 2s and 3s and 4s and 5s. And what they want is a return to talking about the potential and giving assistance and speaking about the real economy. So when I say that language let us down, you know, I'll just say this word, which is, I used the word, I said that the failure has been based on a radical individualism. And what I meant by that is that I was criticising a model of life where the only measure of a person was the wealth that they had accumulated. And I had said we need to get to a point where, beyond the economic, where we ask how does a society value the individual, and even beyond the economic, how does the individual relate to themselves, to society, the economy and the nation. It looks
like the front runner in the polls is a man, Sean Gallagher, whose ethos would be, you know, go for it, be an entrepreneur, get out there. He did it himself. He was a self-made man. So he's your, if you like, the polls tell us, your major competitor. So these are two opposing views of life.
Yes, they are. And quite frankly, you know, I described some of the last decade and a half where people went to bed and woke up as they thought as millionaires because of the property bubble that was adding value in a bogus way to their property. And what I'm really saying is that I actually think we need jobs. This is the important, but you need to speak about how you do that within the limits of the Constitution and what the President can do. May I give you an example, if I may? For example, one I haven't used until now. People usually associate me, when I was minister, with things in the film industry and in the audiovisual. And it went from 12 million to 187 million. It is today 388 million with the capacity to double. But there's an unknown one that I haven't had the time to go into. And that was what I negotiated 23 million with the European Union for our canals. There were, in fact, actually 2,200 registered vessels on the Shannon in 1993. There are today over 9,000. And the little works that were carried out, improved locks, and guest houses came into existence, and people began providing food. And you know what that means? You must talk about encourage what is there and what is best. And you must be sustainable. And you see, that is something. Right. If you contrast that, for example, now, why am I saying that and putting that emphasis as we're coming into the last phase of the campaign? I am absolutely shocked at what has happened in Aviva. For example, 950 jobs lost and 200 in Galway, where I know very well, and I know so many of them. And equally, I am shocked about what is happening in Priory House. What is the common element? The common element is a model that didn't have an ethical core. And I make no secret of it.
Do you think Sean Gallagher has an ethical core?
I think that the model is ethically vacuous.
Do you think he's ethically vacuous?
No, I won't speak about a person. I think that the model I think that you have to...
The model he stands for is ethically vacuous?
Yes, I do. I think that model, for example, is simply something that it doesn't really draw on the strengths of the Irish people. And that's...
Is he the candidate you were referring to as a leftover of the Celtic Tiger?
Well, I think I made one of those speeches earlier, and I said, really, I find it very difficult to dissociate his campaign from what was there in the excesses of the Celtic Tiger. I also, by the way, have questions about... I remember I was chairman of an executive of a party myself years ago. I find it very hard to believe that one, if you disagreed profoundly with the assumptions that were guiding economic and social policy, that you wouldn't try to turn the party around and that you wouldn't try and change the policy. But I want to be positive because, you know...
But he is the man that the polls are telling us is ahead of you. You were at the top of the poll for many weeks, and suddenly he's there. If you are to succeed in your bid for the presidency, you've got to attack him, haven't you?
No, it isn't a matter of attacking at all. I'll tell you what.
Well, undermining him.
You know, when I spoke about the presidency before, I want to, most people ask me the question, didn't you want to stand for the presidency before? And I did in 2004 when I had little chance of being elected, but it was because I wanted a debate on where we were as a society and what was happening in the assumptions about the economy. And I actually believe that we deepened exclusiveness at home. We lost inclusion, and abroad we were damaging our reputation. Now, I know about reputation abroad because I represented Ireland abroad. I represented Ireland abroad when I was president of the Council of Culture Ministers, and I saw the value of attending the meetings, going out, working on the relationships. It's a network that's already there.
But one of the most important relationships we have is that with the United States. And yet you have, on many occasions, been implacably opposed to the foreign policies of the United States. You've protested very publicly. You've been very critical. Now, you could be looking not at President Obama next year. You could be looking at President Romney, perhaps, or President Perry, people who would be diametrically opposed to everything that you believe in.
Well, they would, of course. It's very interesting that Martin Sheen agrees with me, but not only Martin Sheen, but the American...
Well, he's only a fictitious president. He's an actor.
No, but let me answer you very directly. In this election, I'm probably, of the candidates, I'm the one who is a graduate of an American university. I've taught at an American university. I've read papers in about 6 of the universities. I happily attended at the invitation of the current American ambassador, the ceremonies in Bridge for 9/11. The question is this. You are right. I opposed some of the illegal foreign policy in the Reagan period, and I did so with the support of the American bishops. And you know who proposed the motion that I advocated for? Senator Teddy Kennedy. And the facts are the vote was 84-12 in favour of Senator Kennedy. Now, I have no difficulty whatever.
But you remember well when Ronald Reagan was getting his honorary degree in Galway, and you were involved in a de-conferring ceremony in Eyre Square.
Yes.
In other words, you offered an insult at the time to an American president, and you know the way Americans are. I mean, it's Mr. President this, and when they're president, they get all they're given the dignity of the office, and even in retirement, they're almost untouchable in terms of comment. I mean, if people start going over your record and see what they perceive to be an insult offered to an American president who, now that he's deceased, and even in his later years, was much beloved by the American people.
He had great charm, but I think that if they started going over the record, which president will they hit first? They will spend more time on the amount of time I spent with President Jimmy Carter, whom I met here in Ireland and who paid tribute to my work for human rights. I met Jimmy Carter in Africa. I met Jimmy Carter in Central America. And, you know, it's very important that we answer this. The American people are a warm, fine people. And I know that. Why? Because I lived there. I wasn't married. They kept inviting me to dinners and meals. They were just wonderful. But at the same time, many of them would say to me, how do you best help your friend? You tell your friend when something is wrong. And they were losing prestige in relation to Salvador, for example, which was illegal, and also then in relation to the Iraq war. If you're asking me, do I regret, for example, opposing the Iraq war? No, I do not. And you know why, too? Because I think of all those thousands of working class and wonderful youngsters who were killed. That's on one side, but then all of them...
More recently, the Pit Stops Ploughshares protest in Shannon, we know about the damage to American aircraft. And that was a campaign that you supported as well.
I supported, I campaigned against extraordinary rendition, and very, very clearly. And you know, everything I said is there on the record, but I wasn't involved in that act. So we
but you supported them? No, I'm not saying you were involved in the act.
I think it's very important, yeah, or that particular section of the campaign, yeah. I think we need to be very accurate.
The question of foreign policy, the Americans again, and Israel. Yeah. And your support of the Palestinian cause in general, but also Hamas in particular.
Well, I think that, no, I have never supported Hamas directly.
You have said that the free and fair elections which got them elected in Gaza.
I did.
But this is a movement which is firing rockets into Israel, yes, sending people in who become suicide bombers. One of those released yesterday has testified, yes, that it's her ambition to do it again. She was caught the first time. She wants to kill herself again for the cause. I mean, these are people that you have offered support to. No,
I think you don't mind if I'm very clear about it, because it's important. Because I have visited Gaza with the former Prime Minister of Holland, Andreas van Acht, and 6 other ministers from the European Union. We were the first people to visit after the Israeli withdrawal from Gaza in 2005. I've met many members of the Israeli government as well. I visited, by the way, that village which has been shelled and condemned the shelling of civilians unequivocally. But you know...
But you had a difficulty with the EU adding Hamas to the list of prescribed terrorist organisations.
I did, because why?
These are people who are doing the kinds of things that you abhor in the background of Martin McGuinness, for example.
I think you should be clear about what the decision that was taken in Brussels was. It was first of all, there was a problem with the procedure by which it was taken. It wasn't taken by ministers. It was taken by a subcommittee of the permanent representatives. And here was the issue. And it's a very good issue. It's an issue, by the way, in which I have the same view as Senator Mitchell, when Senator Mitchell was in the Middle East. And it is this: if we are to have peace in the Middle East, Israel correctly aspires to a security that is endurable. Equally, on the other side, the Palestinians want a state that is contiguous. You can't have 2 bits of it. That it is viable,
but they're at each other's throats, by the way, and you know that.
And that enjoys full sovereignty. And you know, when you're being positive, and this is where it's so important for candidates too. I proposed again and again, and I'll give you an example. I said that we could have achieved so much more if there had been a permanent secretariat to the peace talks in the Middle East, rather like we had in Northern Ireland, because there were many times when the 2 principals, for example, were far apart, and the bureaucrats kept producing text which saved the peace process. And that raises me with something else. You know, there are so many skills in Ireland that we can, in fact, be of assistance abroad.
But isn't that what Sinn Fein are actually doing now in the Basque region? They're bringing their skills to bear that Martin McGuinness touts all the time as a very major strength in his campaign. They're bringing those to bear. Jerry Adams was over at in the Basque region at the weekend. That's exactly what they're saying.
But wouldn't it be very churlish not to recognise that they've embraced the path of peace? I do so.
But you said about Martin McGuinness that you feared that Sinn Féin would use his campaign to rationalise and endorse the IRA campaigns of the past.
Well, I think that you need to work this out now.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out exactly, you look at Hamas on the one hand, who are committed to the destruction of the state of Israel. That's their stated position. Not Fatah's, by the way, but it's Hamas's position. And then you have this criticism of peace process.
Just so that listeners don't get misled, I have never been a spokesman for Hamas, ever.
I never said you were a spokesman.
But what I did say was, and I still believe it, that if we're to have enduring peace in the Middle East, this is a view I won't be able to express as president, but if we are to have enduring peace in the Middle East, they will have to be part of the talks.
Did you say recently to some group during this campaign who were kind of saying, where's the Michael D we all know and love? the campaigning, Michael D, speaking out for women's rights, for civil rights, for travellers' rights and all the rest.
But I still do that. I visited the Delaney's, for example, about 2 months ago.
But you're being much more circumspect. I think you even smiled when you said that you've been advised to say less.
I haven't been. No. Michael D isn't Raptors taped up at all.
But you did say that the real people will once again see the real Michael D when you're in the Áras.
All right, I'll tell you. They've seen it most recently, I'll tell you, in a very interesting way. They saw it on the Spun Out debate last Saturday, when you had 400 youngsters, not drawn from the universities only, but from every aspect of youth in Ireland. And we went in, they polled the people going in. I was 29%. When I came out, I was 47%. Pat, I can tell you, what does it tell you? And I learned something. Why do I admire these youngsters in a way? They know when the language must fit with the moral conviction, and that if you believe in something strongly enough, and it was my advice to them, you take the responsibility of communicating it. But no one advised me. But I'll tell you why you are seeing a change. When I am in the Áras, if I am in the Áras, I will not be a member of a political party. If I am in the Áras, a term, the three functions of the presidency, the constitutional obligations, which I have no difficulty with because of my background and my training. The next one is the ceremonial duties, and I have already gone through it with you, where I can't speak for Michael D. Higgins, I speak for Ireland. And the third one is under Article 13.9, that discretionary space. And there you will see the Michael D. Why? Because from day one I will be visiting communities where I see the real shoots of growth, not in a version of the economy that values people in terms of what they own, but in terms of their relationship to their community and their society. And they will also see me when I go abroad. They'll hear me speaking to the people I know, like Václav Havel and all of those others.
Okay,
and
I'm glad you brought him up.
And that will be an invaluable network.
I'm glad you brought up Václav Havel, because when Richard Crowley went with Kay Sheehy, our producer here, to visit Václav Havel after he became president, a shadow of a man, a lame duck of a president, a man whose interview was virtually unusable, a waste of space, because he had been circumscribed by all the advisors and by the limits of government. And isn't that exactly what will happen to Michael D or any of the other candidates where they'd be successful?
Would you mind terribly if I said that they should have checked a bit more? Because he has written a book called In the Castle, which is his diary of his period in the presidency. And I have a copy. And
I'm just telling you, their one-to-one experience trying to get something meaningful from this very famous man.
The problem, of course, no. I was only giving him as an example because why? It is so important that the person who fills the presidency is a person of substance. I respect all of the other candidates. They bring different experiences to their quest and so on. I'm offering the life that is Michael D's life. I have described, for example, about how I started out. I don't bore people with it, but it was one of moving from a small farm to a factory, to working in the ESB, to going to university, and then working in many universities. And I go back into the public life. And you were right to say something earlier. I remember being in RTE studios and radio studios when I had people stacked against me on women's rights, on children's rights, and then when I went abroad to look at massacres or to write about famine or whatever. This is a life lived in the public space. And what I'm saying is, for the next 7 years, I want to take the ethical content of what we need, the building of trust, the restoration of language to mean something. And this will shock you in a way about it. I've spent a lot of the time in the last year since I left politics reading economics again, because it was in economics I started. My first lectures in the university were in monetary economics.
Getting back to the presidency and the Michael D, who is very typically outspoken. On your website, you have a lot of the stuff, all the campaigns it's almost like, on one level, we watch you on television presidential debates, and there is the dignified Michael D, who doesn't put in too many low blows, although I can recall giving Mary Lou MacDonald a right little thump about the spending cuts in Northern Ireland.
That was just a reminder.
Where you said, I could say this, but I wouldn't because that would be nasty. So you managed to get your dig in while pretending you weren't given. So you are a tough guy, but mostly it's been dignified. But then on your website,
But that's required.
there's the other side of you,
Yeah,
the
all
campaigning side. So, the young people are on your website. They're the people who are digitally minded, and they're seeing all of this, fight and talk. And then on the telly, the older viewer is looking at a different Michael.
Well, it's a fair question. And I'd like to answer it, My next word, which is important, it is important to be authentic. What I decided to do was that I wouldn't go along with creating a new Michael D, that I would in fact offer the full story. And that's why my website has all those struggles in it. I don't know, I think from memory now, that I don't think to have the second one in 82, I lose an election with Jimmy Kimmy because of the forces that were opposed to our rights campaign. But you have to be authentic. And then there's something else in it, in a way. They call it Crianna Canaha in Irish. There's a certain wisdom that you acquire as you go along. You do and offer your life the way it's best delivered at a particular time. There is, I can assure you, no contradiction. Moral, ethical, political campaign.
But you do accept, and you've said it moments ago, that for 7 years you will speak on behalf of the Irish people rather than on the part of Michael D. One of the things which...
And there is, you said it earlier, their choice is between the vision of Ireland and Irishness offered by Michael D and the vision of Ireland that has been offered in this last 15 years. And I mean, I'm perfectly sure, this is why I'm confident, that's why I believe the response I'm getting is a very, 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 very encouraging one.
One of the things that your partner in life, your wife, and as radical as you are, she believes passionately in all the things that you believe.
From the days she had founded it.
She said, and it's in the blogosphere, as they say, about the Irish media, the print media, ignoring your more revolutionary and radical statements. The question is, will she be as circumscribed if she's living in the Ors, or will she be out there campaigning as she's always done? Will she be on the barricades while you're up in the Phoenix Park?
I think she will be wonderful. I think that
goes without saying that you would say that, wouldn't you?
No.
But you know what I mean? She has a life of her own. You've always talked about women's independence. So will she be free to carry on campaigning?
She will be. I'll tell you one of the things that is very important about Sabina. If you, in fact, as you know, Sabina was one of the founding members of the Focus Theatre with Deirdre O'Connell, Luke's wife, and she was bridesmaid at their wedding. And one of the things you learn in theatre, you simply learn a great discipline. You know what the performance requires. And also the other interesting thing is that we're married now for 37 years. We know each other. We're together for 42 years. And actually, here's the test in the end. Do you think that if we didn't know how to read situations in the public and the many different multi-layered versions, that I would be elected for 25 years? Sabina is just full of it. She will have wonderful talents. She's a very warm person.
The question was, though, will she feel as circumscribed by the discipline imposed by government on the president? Because she is her own person, she's entitled to her own life.
But isn't that right? And isn't that correct? I mean, why should I answer for her? I'm just simply saying, if you're asking me to make a calculation on it, I think she'll be great.
So she could be on the barricades and you could be...
No, I didn't say that. You can't send your wife out to the barricades like that. Partners, as I will say, exercise choices. But let's say it this way. I have every confidence in her discretion.
Such is her loyalty that she would not embarrass you. Is that really the answer to this?
Oh, no, we have we respect. I said I have, what I will say, it's the easiest way to summarise it. I have every confidence, not only in her discretion, but in her creativity and her warmth and her generosity. And she will be invaluable at home and even more valuable abroad.
We move on to something that on this programme Dana Rosemary Scallon said, and I know you want to maybe comment, but this is what she said.
Would it be pretty difficult then for someone who is pro-abortion rights, like the Labour candidate or...
Would it be pretty difficult for someone who is pro-abortion rights like the Labour candidate? That's you. That's what she's saying about you. And on my text screen, there are a number of people who want you to answer that question. Where do you stand on abortion? Yeah?
Well, I spoke on abortion in 1982 when I think it was the 8th Amendment of the Constitution Bill was being debated. At that stage, I said I felt that the wording would create more difficulties, that it was a complex problem. I remember actually seconding and supporting amending motions by Catherine McGuinness and Mary Robinson. The referendum went ahead, and then much later you had the court case. Now, the position is this. As President, I respect the view of the Supreme Court. I respect the role of the legislature. And if legislation comes before me, in the event of I being President, I certainly will not be imposing any views of my own in relation to it. This isn't to say I'm not required. It wouldn't be appropriate to. I'm simply being very, 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 very clear.
Yeah, but people want to know what you think of it. Should a woman have a right to have an abortion?
I think that the woman's life is very important. I think that the wording that was agreed in the amendment wasn't helpful, but it is the will of the people. I accept the will of the people. That's all that is important now.
But if you were to be characterised as either pro-choice or pro-life, which side of that argument would you come down on?
I think that in relation to the woman is entitled to protect her health, and equally we have to have right for the fetus. But look, let's clearly, this is not an issue in the presidency, and I have to say this as well. Now, you quoted Dana Rosemary Scallon making this point in saying that the Labour candidate is pro-abortion. All I'll say to you is, and all I'm required to say, this is a false accusation. The Labour Party's candidate for the presidency is somebody who will respect the Constitution, and in respecting the Constitution will take note of the Supreme Court's suggestion that the legislature should be responsible and act. If it does act, I will then test the legislation against the Constitution. And it will be it is very, very wrong to distort that position, which is a careful position.
The point about it is that you're happy to talk about other matters like American foreign policy, which are major in the world, but you seem to be tentative about this. You don't want to say you're pro-choice. You want to,
No, I respect the complexity of the issue. And also in relation to it, for example, I think, do you know what the best thing to do if you want to see where I am in it is to go back and read the 1982-83 debate. And I'll tell you where, just so that I don't appear in the slightest of hesitation, I was always concerned for the health of the mother. I make no secret of that.
A couple of other things. We move on.
In being respectful. No, but just concerned for the life of the mother. I didn't want any other absolute position to put any woman's life in danger.
Okay. A question about the Irish language. You were all involved in a debate in T.G. Cahir, and it was regarded by most of the pundits that you came out very well from that, being fluent Os Gaeilge. Do you think it's right that the highest office of the land doesn't require the people who are running for it to be fluent in the Irish language? I mean, if you want to be a primary school teacher in this country, you have to have Irish. You don't have to have Irish, the first language, to be president. Does that strike you as odd?
Well, I was very happy to speak in Irish because I have to tell you, I learned Irish 3 times. I learned it in Munster, did subjects through Irish. Then I was in England and in America. When I came back, I was living in Galway. So I needed to speak to my constituents, and they were entitled to hear me speak.
But the question, do you think it should be a prerequisite for president that people be fluent in Irish?
Yes, I think they should. I think that
that would discount...
Well, no,
David Norris would... It'd be you and David Norris actually having a go at each other. Dana has no Irish. Martin McGuinness has no Irish.
No, I'm not suggesting...
And 2 other people who are educated in this jurisdiction... Sean Gallagher and Gay Mitchell. Mary Davis has 3 people educated in this jurisdiction where you'd expect them after, 12 years in school to have Irish, don't have any competence in Irish.
Well, I think that's a separate debate as to why that might be the case. But your question, so that I'm very clear, I'm not a fanatic about the Irish language. I'm not imposing it. I'm not doing tests. You asked me a question. Let's be clear, because your listeners might want a very straight answer. I do think that a person standing for Uachtaráin where it is clear that the Irish version of the language technically takes precedence over the English version, where as well as that, it is very important that Muintir na Gaeilge, that the people who speak Irish, they need more than just a few, what I would call Fochlí Imalacha, few words thrown in here or a few sentences. They're entitled to hear their president speak in their language. And very importantly, as the president travels abroad, and you have Irish abroad, It is very important that they hear their own language. And then separately from that, quite frankly, the language has, of course, the cultural importance and the heritage importance that it has.
Are you critical, therefore, of the other candidates who didn't bother taking the time out to learn Irish? Mary Davis has confessed that she's had an ambition for many years
Well, they're all
be
taking
president.
classes, I think, now. I think they said on the programme.
A bit late. So the message to anyone out there, you want to be a one-term president, is if you're thinking of running for president, start learning Irish now, not leave it to year 7.
Well, they should be leave at the end of 7 years anyway, if I'm elected. So there will be the candidate standing would imagine to succeed me.
You talked about jobs earlier on, and we could discuss the question of if America perceives you to be in some way inimical to them, and they've invested so much in pharmaceuticals and in the digital activities here. But another source of jobs and activity was Shell to Sea. Are you still a supporter of Shell to Sea?
I'm not involved in any campaigns at the moment.
No, but are you a supporter of their attempt not to get the gas ashore in Mayo?
I can't comment on that because that issue will not be resolved before the presidency when I'm in the presidency.
But it's not a matter of legislation. Shell and the other people went through all the legal hoops and have every right to do what they're doing, the planning hoops and so on. I'm just asking you, do you support their activities? I think that you should stop for a moment to pause on that, actually. But I think that, unfortunately, there were many shortcuts taken in relation to the planning process. But look, I think I'll answer you more fully than that. I always supported the Justin Keating model of the use of our resources. Now, I thought that model offered us benefits. It offered us information which was vital in relation to a policy that was, after all, scientific. So what about Pat Rabbitt's awarding of the licences now with what the Norwegians have described as very generous terms, ridiculously so? I mean, why bother bringing this stuff out of the ground if you're going to make no money of it? Most of the infrastructural stuff is sourced in Scotland, so even the money spent is spent there, not here. So,
well, these are questions that would have been very appropriate for me when I was a member of the Dáil.
But people want to know. See, they're asking all the candidates about all sorts of things to get the temperature of who they are, what they believe in, and this is one that people want to know. Are you a supporter of Shell to Sea? They want to know, do you approve of what Pat Rabbitt has done in the latest licensing round?
Well, you'll respect me now if I hope that fact that I shouldn't answer questions that are outside of the remit of the presidency. I'll tell you about something else about that, which is important. You shouldn't promise things that are outside of the presidency either. For example, I gave you an example about job creation, so forth. I gave you an example about my time as minister when I created an atmosphere that created jobs. There are things that TDs do, there are things that ministers do, there are things that presidents do. I fought the battle and supported, indeed, those people who wanted to use their natural resources for the benefit of all of the people of Ireland, and I supported them when there were breaches of planning. Now, that having been said, I am not a member of the Dáil now, and I cannot, I'm afraid, answer your questions when they are affecting current policy. Why? Because within 3 weeks I will, in fact, be having an independent office separate from government. I will not be a member of the Labour Party. You just have to accept that. If you interview me again after the 27th of October...
You'll be able to say nothing.
That's quite wrong, you see. This is the whole point. You must go back to your constitution and look at 13.9. And you will say, what happened previous presidents after they were inaugurated? Mary Robinson visited the Simon community, massively inclusive. Mary McAleese visited communities in relation to Northern Ireland. I have a whole programme of events, inclusion at home, visiting creative good communities, doing work abroad. But I also have suggested, for example, I took up an Erskine Childers proposal of running seminars on themes that are important, such as being young in Ireland,
you will be able
restoring
to appoint
trust.
7 members to the Council of State. Mary Davis yesterday talked about them being ambassadors, sending them around the country. What do you think of that idea?
I'm afraid that I hadn't envisaged that role for the Council of State.
So you won't be sending them around the country as your ambassadors?
The Council of State that I will appoint will be representative of general. And you know something's very important. It will have representatives of young people, but it will also have representatives of the 500,000 people who are over the age of 60.
Now, you have said there are certain questions you won't answer. The listeners can make up their own mind in terms of your response.
No, I've said that there are certain questions it wouldn't be appropriate for me to answer.
That's fair enough.
But my record is there, and people will know where morally and ethically I stand on all of those
So they look
issues.
to your record to get the answers to my questions that you feel you can't. One last thing, this is only a frivolous thing, but it just came into me. Irish Polygraph Company, Lie Detector Ireland, are offering to run a polygraph on all the candidates. Do you think that'd be a good idea?
No, I don't. I think that I'm very happy to have every single thing I say tested. But you know what I do think? Because you have asked that question, I do think in the remaining days, it is an office that requires dignity. And now in the shadow of the people making up their mind, there should be a dignified treatment of the campaign.
What do
and
you
to be
think
frank with you, I see the fun in it, but I don't think it
What
would be
about
appropriate.
the fun in green tea on a Saturday afternoon, characterising yourself and David Norris as sort of two retired panto dames in the Oris as joint presidents? Have you heard any of that satire?
No. But I can appreciate how it would be there. You must remember, I believe, for example, that my voice is done better by Mario Rosenstock
Done by yourself?
No, well, we did a two-hander in which there was a prize for guessing who was speaking.
So you have a sense of humour.
Well, you have to have it. Why wouldn't you have a sense of humour?
Right.
I mean, isn't it? You know, the important thing about that is that you really need to know when to take yourself seriously and when, in fact, to, for God's sake, restore yourself with a good laugh. Yeah.
Michael D. Higgins, thank you very much for joining us in the studio this morning.
It's been a pleasure.